Our next speaker will be Finotello, who's going to talk to us about his and his colleagues' work on natural and anthropogenic modifications of back barrier lagoon feedback into the morphosedimentary evolution of tidal meanders in the Venice lagoon.
Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how natural and anthropogenic modifications of the Venice lagoon, which occurred during the last 2 centuries, have impacted on the morphosedimentary evolution of tidal meanders. The Venice lagoon is a semi-diurnal macrotidal back barrier system connected to the high Adriatic Sea through 3 inlets, which are Lido, Malamocco, and Chioggia from north to south. Both fluvial and longshore sediment supply are nowadays negligible in the lagoon, so the morphodynamics depends strongly on wind-induced sediment transport mechanism. And in particular, the most morphodynamically important wind is the Bora wind, blowing from northeast and generating high waves and significant sediment resuspension of sediments during storm events. In this presentation, I'll focus in particular on meandering channels named the Gazan channel, located in the North Lagoon. This channel is about 100 meters wide, 8 meters deep, and in our study area, it comprises 2 consecutive bends surrounded by well-developed salt marsh systems. The channel morphology nowadays is characterized by the presence of 2 major lateral tributaries here to the north, and by the presence of what's sort of a barb depositional morphologies located on the seaward side of the bend number 2 apex right here. The median sediment grain size at the channel bed is about 130 microns, with cohesive sediment content lower than 20% in volume. Historical topographic maps shows that basically 2 major anthropogenic interventions occur in the northern Venice lagoon in the last 2 centuries. First, many areas were either reclaimed or converted to fish farms, so they are no longer open to tides. And second, starting from 1887, jetties were built at the Lido Inlet to allow for larger vessels to enter the lagoon. These jetties, the presence of these jetties critically modified the inlet morphology as well as its hydrodynamics. And these down here are the results of numerical simulation that we carried out, which shows that the maximum ebb and flood velocity at the Lido Inlet right and before the construction of the jetty changed significantly. So long story short, what the jetties did was to promote the dominance of ebb flow, which in turn promote net sediment export to the open sea, causing deepening of the tidal flat and erosion of the salt marshes within the lagoon. These hydrodynamics and morphological changes impacted on the evolution of our study channel as well, even if the overall channel morphology hasn't changed too much through time, we can actually see that channel banks have been actively migrating. And these migrations be characterized by symmetric expansion between 1901 and 1938, with inner bank deposition and outer bank erosion, both upstream and downstream of the bend apexes. Then from 1938 onwards, we observe significant deposition only on the downstream side of this bend right here, while significant bank erosion occurred along the other channel banks, causing also a significant widening of the channel. Bathymetric data overall show a tendency of the channel to get deeper through time. And in particular, we see that from 1970, basically, there is the appearance of this barb right here, which is the same barb that we saw from aerial images at the beginning of the presentation. To investigate hydrodynamic changes within our study channel, we've used numerical models. I don't have time to go in details here, but basically the model is an existing model developed at the University of Padova, for which several computational grids were already available. And this grid reproduced the Venice lagoon morphology in different years from 1887 to 2014. Results of the numerical models show a continuing increase in local tidal range, flow velocity, and flow discharge, with the most marked changes occurring between 1901 and 1970, basically, which is after the construction of the jetties at the inlet. We have also quantified changes in tidal asymmetry using the ratio between the maximum ebb and flood velocity. And we saw that tidal flow within the Gazan channel were flood dominated in 1887, then nearly symmetric in 1901. Then they shift to strongly ebb dominated in 1932 and 1970. before going back to a slightly flat dominated regime in 2014. Numerical modeling also show different evolutionary trend as flow discharge and tidal asymmetry changes within the channel. We see in particular that there is not much going on in terms of erosion and deposition in 1887. Then in 1901, we see deposition going on both upstream and downstream of the band apexes. Whereas in 1932 and 1970, sediment deposition happens consistently on the seaward side of the band apexes. And interesting, we also see the formation of an elongated depositional area that resembles the barb that we have seen both from aerial images and bathymetric data. Finally, in 2014, we get back to a situation in which deposition occurs both upstream and downstream of the apexes. And basically what you see from these two columns right here is that the overall morphological contribution of the flood phase is small when tides are strongly ebb dominated. Overall, our results support the idea proposed by Tambroni and co-authors in 2017 that depositional bodies within tidal meandering channel tend to form downstream of the band apex relative to the dominant tidal flow. We've also tried to correlate hydrodynamic and morphological changes, but we found very weak correlations between channel bank migration and both channel widening and widening rate. So basically this suggests that the migration we see does not depend primarily on the widening of the channel. In fact, migration rate seems to be controlled by local channel curvature in a fashion that is similar to what we observe in river meanders, where migration rates increase as channel curvature increases as well, and then they tend to plateau at high curvature values. Migration rates seems also not correlated with tidal asymmetry nor with tidal prism, but in contrast we see that changes in tidal prism are strongly correlated with changes in the channel cross-sectional area. So what we learn from this analysis is that tidal prism control channel cross-sectional geometry, and that channel curvature instead control meander migration. So far in our simulation, we haven't considered sediment transport processes induced by wind waves. So we have also run some simulation, including the effects of Bora wind, and in particular of intense storm events characterized by Bora winds. And these are the results in terms of flow discharge plotted against the suspended sediment concentration within the Gajah channel. Empty dots denote normal condition, fair weather condition, so without winds, while field dots indicate storm events of Bora wind. Back in 1887 and 1901, we see that suspended sediment concentration did not change significantly during storm events compared to fair weather conditions. However, starting from 1932, we see that during storm events, the concentration of suspended sediments can be significantly higher than during fair weather condition, suggesting that wind wave-induced sedimentary suspension becomes increasingly important. This is likely due to a positive feedback mechanism that is once again likely triggered by the construction of the jetties and the inlet. So the jetties, as I said, set a negative sediment budget and promote erosion of tidal flats and soft marshes, which in turn increase water depth and wind fetches within the lagoon, in this way promoting the formation of higher and more powerful waves, which eventually enhance the erosional processes even further. We have also collected a bunch of seismic and core data in different types of deposits. The most interesting are probably deposits associated with point bars, which show an internal bedding dipping toward the channel talweg at angle ranging from 10 to 20 degrees. We also see that there is an overall firing upward trends from fine sand to mud in the point bar deposits, and we also found some millimetric laminae of fine to very fine sand. And these laminations are mostly conformable to the accretion surfaces, suggesting that the bar accreted mainly through basically the progressive draping of its slope, which is also confirmed by the dominance of muddy deposits. While all deposits are well laminated, we don't find any sign of cyclic changes in laminate thickness. So basically, we don't see any clear tidal rip bites, despite the fact that this is a purely tidal environment. The only clear evidence of tidal processes are these sort of double mud drapes that we found in the point bar deposits. So these are millimetric scale lamination, which we interpreted as mud settling during 2 consecutive slack water phase, characterized by high suspension of sediments. If you are interested in this topic, I suggest to go watch a presentation that Ghinassi gave last year for the Sense Online webinar series. Finally, I'd like to conclude this presentation by stressing the fact that we haven't detected any significant cross-stratification in the channel deposits, and that this points to a lack of well-developed high-relief bedforms. Overall, bedforms are quite elusive in the Venice Lagoon, but within the Gajah channel, however, we were able to identify some by means of side scan data. These dunes, which appear to be nearly symmetric on average, are characterized by lengths ranging between 2.8 and 19 meters, and heights varying from 1 to 34 centimeters. So they are extremely low relieved. Even the lee side angle is quite low. And so we try to interpret these results based on the fact that, low angle dune in rivers are thought to form when ice suspended sediment load bypass the dune lee and settles in the trough, shaping a more rounded dune morphology. So based on what we have seen from numerical simulation, we hypothesized that the mobilization of large volumes of sediment during major storms might be responsible for the scarce development of bedform relief. So to conclude, my take-home messages are that the hydrodynamic and morphological changes of a tidal basin can have a deep impact on tidal meander morphodynamics, mostly by inducing changes in local tidal asymmetry and the related sediment transport regimes. Tidal flow asymmetries also strongly control the planform evolution of meanders, for which channel curvature is key. And finally, we think that mobilization of large volumes of sediment during major storm events is responsible for the scarce development of high relief platforms. This is all from my side. Thank you very much. And of course, I'll take any questions.
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much for that. Are there questions in the audience? Well, I was wondering one thing. I'm not sure if I got this right, but it looked like the channel where you analyzed this sediment deposition and erosion, it appeared as if you had sediment accumulation toward landward and seaward from the meander bend, but I did not see much accumulation on the inside of the bend right at the meander. Is that true? And if so, why would you think, because I would expect on the inside of a meander to see accumulation of sediment. Is it because the ebb and flood currents just keep removing it from the inside of that bend? But it still seems a little counter to what I would expect for the inside of a meander bend, even in a tidal setting. I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by you don't see any sediment movement in the inside, the meander?
The accumulation that you had plots, you showed a map of accumulation of sediment.
Yeah.
And it might be a small thing, but it looked like the sediment was accumulating landward and seaward from the inside bend, but not at the inside bend. Or maybe I didn't catch that.
Now, so basically what we see, what we see basically is that the way in which sediments accumulate can really change through time, and that also, what I did was sort of probably an oversimplification to make the concept clearer. When I state that sediments tends to accumulate, sediments can accumulate on both sides of the meander. That really depends on, what's the dominant tidal current you have there. So it's really hard to predict where sediments accumulate if you don't have any control of what the tidal asymmetry is within your channel. And the fact is also that, as I shown, tidal asymmetry can basically change through time, both because the channel morphology itself is changing, and above all because the basin morphology is changing. So we see this sort of accumulating on one side, but then the dynamic regime changes. So basically, you can have accumulation pretty much everywhere. And in Marta's presentation this morning, there was a clear example which showed on the end that it was evolving in one way, and then probably the tidal asymmetry changed, and so also the evolutionary trajectory of the meander changed as well. So yeah, that's probably the bottom line of this. So it really depends on tidal asymmetries, and basically you can accumulate segments pretty much everywhere. And in some cases, this one is not of them, it's not one of them, but in some cases you can also develop mid-channel bars with mutually invasive F and flat channels. So that's, yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. Nice. We have another question here.
Hello. Yeah. So in the same map, I think that Becky was talking about, there is towards the north, but I guess it's the north, the top of the picture, there is some crevasse plays that seem to be coming out of that channel. And I was wondering if there is any relationship between the tides and the growth of that channel, of that crevasse play. That crevasse play captures some of the ebb or flat currents, right?
Yeah, that actually looks like a crevasse play, but through the analysis of historical images, we could see that actually that's more like a drainage pattern. So those two big channels to the north that are clearly visible nowadays were really much smaller, like 1 century ago. And their evolution is strongly dependent on the evolution of the tidal flat, subtidal flat actually, that is located north of the starry site. So basically what happened there is that as much as for the whole Venice lagoon, that tidal flat tend to become deeper through time. So it means that waves also got higher and higher there, generating more and more sedimentary suspension. And also the fact that the tidal flat got deeper causes those two tributaries to become much wider and deeper through time. So we have also run some numerical simulation including the effect of these two lateral tributaries, and what you can see is that back in the days, like in 1930s, the contribution of these two channels were kind of small, both in terms of flow and the sediment concentration. And then instead nowadays they can contribute significantly to the evolution of the channel. In fact, right in front of one of these tributaries, we see what's sort of a delta-like morphology, let's say, generated by the sediment transport coming from there. But again, those are not crevasse clay, which are actually very rare, and that's probably because when you have the higher water level, water velocity is typically very low, so you are at slack water, and so there's typically not great opportunity to generate what's a crevasse clay in a fluid sense.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. I guess we'll move on to the next talk.